Chapter 4. Convinced, feeling certain that something is true.
Well, what I mean is that I am not convinced that anybody was killed.
Pliancy, ability to change, flexibility.
That's right, Spock. But exceptional pliancy was indicated.
Temper, a person's state of mind seen in terms of their being angry or calm.
I knew a lady very like your sister, the same impulsive sweetness of temper, who was forced into, as you put it, a better acquaintance with the world.
Unassailed, not influenced or attacked.
Passing it on to the United Nations in New York. From there, the news was forwarded to Washington, because here was the only remaining unassailed strategic point.
Disposed, inclined or willing.
I'm not presently disposed to discuss those operations, sir.
Deficient, not having enough of something.
And is there any evidence to show that my client is deficient in her ability to provide this support?
Nor, used before the second or further of two or more alternatives, the first being introduced by a negative such as neither or not, to indicate that they are each untrue or each do not happen.
He will be welcome neither in the halls of government nor in its back rooms of power.
Conceited, excessive pride in oneself.
When you're a pretty girl, and I know it makes me sound conceited, but that's why you're even writing me, right?
Seminary, a college that prepares students to be priests, ministers, or rabbis.
Went to seminary school before I joined the Navy.
Entitled, Believing oneself to be inherently deserving of privileges or special treatment.
But the young lady's entitled to her opinion, and nobody should be attacking her for that, much less holding her at gunpoint.
Circumstance, the conditions that affect a situation, action, event.
William, my circumstances changed.
Fortune, a large amount of money or assets.
Divide my brother's fortune by 147.
Acquire, to obtain something by buying it or being given it.
This was acquired by our friends at the CIA.
Inherit, receive, money, property, or a title, as an heir at the death of the previous holder.
We are the ones who will inherit this earth.
Property, a thing or things belonging to someone, possessions collectively.
You're under arrest for stealing government property.
Purchase, acquire, something, by paying for it, buy.
There must be a formula for the computation of the purchase price.
Estate, an extensive area of land in the country, usually with a large house, owned by one person, family, or organization.
I insist. You must come to my estate for breakfast tomorrow. Agreed? Agreed.
County, an area of state or country that has its own government to deal with local matters.
The big man in this county is Max Roca.
Liberty, the freedom and the right to do whatever you want without asking permission or being afraid of authority.
Personal liberty is the liberty of a murderer.
Manor, a large country house with lands.
With all due respect, sir, Wayne Manor is your house.
Anxious, worried about something.
My husband was anxious for me to go.
Establish, to start a company, organization, system that is intended to exist or continue for a long time.
I'm willing to take less to establish a business relationship.
Tenant, a person who occupies land or property rented from a landlord.
Oh, you must be the new tenant.
Preside, be in the position of authority in a meeting or other gathering.
Your role as a father is to preside over, provide for, and protect his family.
Suit, be convenient for or acceptable to.
Yes, I do. How can you like a person like her? She'd lie if it suited her, she'd steal if it suited her. Love her?
Tempt, to try to persuade someone to do something by making it seem attractive.
This is a dangerous time for you, when you will be tempted by the dark side of the Force.
Satisfied, contented, pleased.
Are you satisfied with our product?
Chapter 4. Part 2. Elizabeth listened in silence, but was not convinced. Their behavior at the assembly had not been calculated to please in general, and with more quickness of observation and less pliancy of temper than her sister, and with a judgment too unassailed by any attention to herself, she was very little disposed to approve them. They were in fact very fine ladies, not deficient in good humor when they were pleased, nor in the power of making themselves agreeable when they chose it, but proud and conceited. They were rather handsome, had been educated in one of the first private seminaries in town, had a fortune of £20,000, were in the habit of spending more than they ought, and of associating with people of rank, and were therefore in every respect entitled to think well of themselves, and meanly of others. They were of a respectable family in the north of England, a circumstance more deeply impressed on their memories than that their brother's fortune and their own had been acquired by trade. Mr. Bingley inherited property to the amount of nearly £100,000 from his father, who had intended to purchase an estate, but did not live to do it. Mr. Bingley intended it likewise, and sometimes made choice of his county, but as he was now provided with a good house and the liberty of a manor, it was doubtful to many of those who best knew the easiness of his temper, whether he might not spend the remainder of his days at Netherfield, and leave the next generation to purchase. His sisters were anxious for his having an estate of his own, but, though he was now only established as a tenant, Miss Bingley was by no means unwilling to preside at his table, nor was Mrs. Hurst, who had married a man of more fashion than fortune, less disposed to consider his house as her home when it suited her. Mr. Bingley had not been of age 2 years, when he was tempted by an accidental recommendation to look at Netherfield House. He did look at it, and into it for half an hour, was pleased with the situation and the principal rooms, satisfied with what the owner said in its praise, and took it immediately.